All right, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. So housekeeping, if everybody will remember to turn your mics on and pull them up close so the folks that are listening at home can hear you, that would be great. Moving on to Reverend Benson, if you would give us an invocation, please.
Yes, sir. Our Father and our God, as we come once again to do the people's bidding, we ask that you look upon this Union County Board of Education. Bless us, O Lord, to have keen insight as we go about our discussions and deliberations today. Father, we thank you for all those that have come so early in the morning for this meeting and those that are listening by way of electronic media. We ask, O Lord, that you look upon this great county. Bless it wholly in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, if everybody would stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item 4, we need to approve our agenda.
Mr. Chair, move to approve.
All right. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Guzman, for the second. All in favor? All opposed? I have one abstention. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So we're going to move on now to item 5. We will go through a fairly detailed presentation. So if everybody will sit quietly and as we go through this, I would appreciate that. So now I'm going to.
Mr. Yurchek?
Yes.
If I may, there's something I'd like to say.
Can we do that after the presentation, please?
I would prefer to do it now.
Well, we're going to do that after the presentation.
Okay. Well, as the chairman has not given me the courtesy of speaking at this time, I will leave a copy of my statement for each of you that will be entered into the record. And I ask the chair that I be excused from this meeting, and I officially abstain from any votes that take place in my absence during the remainder of this meeting.
That's fine. Michelle. Okay. Mrs. Savage has asked to be excused from this. As the board chair, I agree with that, but because she has asked that her votes be abstentions, we need to have the full board approve her being dismissed and that her votes be counted as abstentions. So I would like someone to give me a motion to do that and a second, please.
I would motion to allow Ms. Savage, is that right?
Thank you. Second, please. Thank you, Ms. Hodges. All in favor? It was unanimous. Okay, moving on to item 5. Mr. Guzman, as Chair of Finance, I know that you've been looking into a lot of this, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to you at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our last meeting, we requested information from the state board, and along with the data from the local board, we took it upon ourselves to kind of collate the data and see how various mileage and expenses matched up. And what I'd like to do is kind of start off with some assumptions. Going in and looking at the data, the assumption is all the expense reports that have been provided have been paid out at the state and local level. So I'll start with that assumption. There are 3 data sets that I'd like to talk about. I'd like to actually go over kind of the metadata, the data explaining the data, and then we'll get kind of looking at the spreadsheet and basically how all that data came together. In your packet today, you received the 3 sets of data, and if you open those up, you'll see that they are labeled. First of all, the first set of data is the state expense reports, and those expense reports, the date range that we're going to deal with in this data set starts on 4/18, which is basically the approval date of that expense report. You'll see on the cover sheet, the approval date was 4/18. That's the first one of 2013. And we will go through the expense reports through 10/24 of 14. So those dates inclusive, that's the date range that we'll be looking at today as far as the state expense reports. You should have each expense report is put together and stapled based on the reporting period. And each report is in chronological order, starting with the oldest report on top and the most recent report on the bottom. There are 17 reports in all in this data set, and each report has been labeled R with a number. So R1 is the oldest expense report, state expense report. R17 is the most recent expense report that we have from the state. Is that clear?
They're on the bottom of our package.
And they may be, the packets may not be exactly in the order, but that's why I want to make sure that we're literally all on the same page before we start looking at the spreadsheet. The 3 items that are in this data set that have the same date, there are, as you go through, you'll find that R4 and R5 were both approved on 7/12. So I just want to make sure if you look at your data set for R4 and R5, R4 should be the total expense for that day should be $420.15. That should be your R4 packet. R5 packet should be, I think it's $237.80. Okay. If you go to R9 and R10, they should be in the order of R9 should be $394.80. And R10 should be $487.60.
So I have those. So R9 should be.
R9 should be $394.80.
Okay.
And if it's then change that if it's not right.
All right. So let me just let me update mine. All right. I'm good.
And that's why we're doing this, just to make sure there's no confusion. And then the last set of documents are let's see here. That doesn't look right. They are the ones that are dated 9/8/14 is the approval date on those. There should be 2 at the same date, 9/8/14.
Is that in the R series?
Yes, it is. Let me get those for you.
What is your R17? I have 716.
Okay, hold on. I'm looking at,
If you look right across the signature line, it comes
Right.
across and then you
okay,
see Wes's signature.
maybe
and you
that's,
see
maybe
9A.
that's not the case. Okay, so let's move on then to the next group of documents. And those would be the documents that are labeled S. This is the State Board of Education travel information. And the date range, the data set we'll be looking at is 6/6/13 through 10/20/14 inclusive. Again, the reports are in chronological order, starting with the oldest report first. There should be 14 reports in this data set. Each report is labeled S1 through 14. Everyone has that? Okay. And then the third data set is the UCPS expense report. The date range we'll be talking about is 6/3/13 through 10/8/14. Again, they're in chronological order, oldest on top. There are 14 reports in this data set. They are labeled L1 through L14.
Mr. Guzman, you're going to have all of these on the screen. You'll be projecting on the screen.
Well, I will not have all of these on the screen.
I
What I'm
just
going to
wanted
do
to
is
make
I
sure
will
everybody
put-
understood the expectation of what the
Well,
screen.
no, these will not be on the screen. These will have to, these are all that documents that have already been made available to the public.
Okay.
And what I'd like to do now is actually go through the spreadsheet. And in this, I know that some of you don't have your computers, so you do have a hard copy of the spreadsheet. And I guess we could put the spreadsheet up on the screen too, so we can all see what I'm going to reference. That's it. Okay, let's go over kind of the layout of the spreadsheet and what you'll be looking at. There obviously are the state board information side by side with the local board information, and the far column is the conflicting reason. Within the report on the state board side, there are obviously two documents that we're looking at. We're looking at the state board expense report, and we're also looking at like a travel log. The mileage in the report, the expense report, and the travel log don't always agree. So the information you'll see in the spreadsheet when it comes to mileage is the mileage that's included on the expense report that was submitted and not the travel log. Each line from the state and local contains a reference column indicating where the information can be found in the reports we just discussed and went through. So you'll see in the far column referenced S1 or R3 on the first line, and then the reference in the local side, it says L1. So when it comes to trying to find where this particular item came from, that's how you'll find it in the documents. Is that clear?
That's on the spreadsheet?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it's not on,
Okay. Except where indicated with a paren of 1, all the travel is round trip travel. So you'll see on the spreadsheet in, let's see here, about the fourth row down, third row down, fourth row down, you'll see the parentheses 1 next to the destination. Those were single leg, they were not round trip travels. But everything else on the spreadsheet, it reflects round trip. Again, the far column is the conflict column, which is basically the general reason for why that item showed up on the spreadsheet. Also in that conflict column, there's some data validation that was done, some spot checks, and those items appear as links, and they point to additional tabs in the spreadsheet, which we will get to as we go through it. Okay, so most of this is kind of self-explanatory, so I don't know we have to spend a whole lot of time going through some of these. Especially the duplicate expense submissions, for instance, in the first two rows. Again, self-explanatory. They were items that were put on the state and the local expense report, duplicate expense submissions. The lines 3 and 4, those were travels that were recorded as round-trip travel, although they were one-way travel. So that was just conflict in that case was called double miles. The item on 6-6 for Burlington, Waxhaw to Burlington, for the high school graduation, that also appeared on the same expense report for 6-7, the date of 6-7. So it was basically a double expense claim on that particular day. The item where it says 6/10/2013 in parentheses, it's 7/10/13, the next row down, Waxhaw to South Providence. That was, again, that was a item that was listed on both local and the state, but on the state, the mileage was obviously not right. It was a 268-mile round trip. And so there were kind of two reasons why that one was on the sheet. The next two were, again, single destination, single leg travel with round trip travel miles. So again, it was a double miles. And then there was a meeting in Hickory that was with Dr. Denise Patterson. And I think if we had a communication with Dr. Patterson, if you want to click on the link where Dr. Patterson was asked about a meeting with Ms. Savage for a number of different occasions. One for a reading assessment, as you can read there, for conferring on separate occasions. And in her response, you can go down there. She said, basically, I have not met with Ms. Savage in Hickory, North Carolina since I began working with Hickory Public Schools and did not see her at the high school graduation. And of course, given the large crowd, she may not have seen her, but we'll get to that. So that's also on here later. But you can go back to the main spreadsheet. The next line down was a duplicate submission for a District 6 NCB SBA conference in Shelby. That was last year, 9/19 of 13. And also, as the next two, they were just duplicate expense submissions on the state and local side. Down on 11/16 of 13, the NCHSAA championships, as well as the NCSBA yearly conference. Again, those were just both duplicate expenses on both local and the state side. The next item, R9 and R10, basically referring to those state reports. If you want to pull those out, when I was looking at these side by side, I see the dates, the authorization date of 12/9/13, and on both of them, they appear to be exactly the same. So it looks like one was maybe submitted, and then the other, it was photocopied, and some numbers were changed. So you see the original R9 was originally submitted for $394.80, and then it looks like it was resubmitted for $487.60. And the difference being, on page 3 of the R10 report, the mileage was increased for a trip to Lenore. It was originally 187.6 miles. It was increased to 232 miles. According to Google Maps, it's about 190 miles. So that's one reason increased. And the very last page of the R10 packet, there was a trip included. It says Guilford County school visit, but actually it was the NCSBA conference in Waxborough on 11/18. That was not in the original submission, the R9 packet, but it was added to the R10 packet and then resubmitted. The question that became, while this is on here, is not only did he not agree, but again, my assumption is that these were all paid out. And again, I don't know. So that's why they made the sheet. It looks like a double expense submission.
Are we assuming this that both R9 and R10 were paid out?
That's my assumption, that all the information I received was paid out. Again, I don't know. I did not talk to the state. But again, it looks like the cover sheets are identical except for some changes to the number on the cover sheet. Okay, on the next item was the travel to Hickory, which is the reading assessments. Again, Dr. Patterson was asked about the reading assessments, and she has no recollection of that happening. The document set R12. You might want to pull that one out. Go to R12, and I believe on page 8 of 14. Page 8 of 14, the first entry is for the date 3/21. It was a trip from Waxhaw to Whiteville, North Carolina. So just kind of keep that in mind. That was one trip to Whiteville. And if you were to cross-reference on the S9 document, you might want to just pull that one out too, because you'll be able to kind of keep track. Okay, so on 3/21, there was an entry to Whiteville, and you can see on the travel log 3/21, those match up. On the next entry on the report for 3/26, it shows another trip to Whiteville. That does not show up on this report. Although there's a 3/26 travel, it wasn't to Whiteville, but we'll keep that in mind. So okay, right now we have basically two trips to Whiteville. So go ahead and turn the page. The next entry is 3/26. It is a trip to Lenore, which does match the travel log. So that one seems valid. The trip that comes in below that on 3/28 is a trip to Marion, which when you look at the log, that is accurate. So turn the page again, and you'll see that we're back to 3/21 and our third trip to Whiteville. And then below that is the 3/26, again, another trip to Lenore, the same trip. And if you turn the page again, on 3/28, you'll see a second trip to Marion on 3/28. So in the spreadsheet, it was identified as Whiteville having 2 extra trips expensed, Lenore having 1 extra trip expensed, and Marion having 1 extra trip expensed. Okay. On the next line, there was travel from Waxhaw to Edenton for a superintendent announcement, and that was the announcement of Superintendent Rob Jackson. And we did inquire with Rob about that event. Can you go ahead and click on that? Is it up there? So we asked if he had any interaction with Ms. Savage on that date, and he says he does not recall seeing or interacting with her at that event.
I'd like to add that I personally talked to Rob Jackson Monday at the Greensboro conference. And I asked him whether the crowd was so large that he could have missed anyone. And he said there was less than 10 people in the room.
I'm sorry. I talked with Rob Jackson Monday at the school board conference in Raleigh, or in Greensboro. And I asked Rob whether there could have been someone, it was a big ceremony or whatever, and he said there was less than 10 people in the room, both occasions.
And I do think that it is noteworthy to add in regard to Mr. Jackson and Ms. Patterson that they are both former Union County Public School employees and were both in cabinet staff since at least 2010. So they would know Ms. Savage. Ms. Savage would know them. They would know faces. We're not talking about strangers here. I do think that that is a point that needs to be made.
Thank you. Mr. Gosman.
All right, moving on. The next item was a visit by Lieutenant Governor. Again, that was a simple, it showed up on both expense reports, local and state, as did the next two, the college, early college graduation and the governor's visit to Sun Valley. The item, again, back to Hickory, Waxhaw to Hickory, on 6/12, there was a high school graduation that was listed. And it conflicted, maybe not apparently, but it looked like it conflicted with a local graduation. And as it turned out, the Hickory graduation wasn't on June 12th at all. It was on June 13th at 8 p.m. And if you scroll down a little bit, you see the Forest Hills was also on June 13th at 8 p.m. So they were the same day and the same time. So again, a conflicting report on how both would happen. The next item was, again, another trip to Edenton. And as Rob Jackson said that he did not see that happening at that time. In this case, although it was entered in the expense report, the travel miles were left out, and the only thing that was recorded was the $15 amount that the board members receive for a daily activity they receive. The item after that on 9/5 was a graduation rate meeting, although on the document labeled S14, I believe it's called a graduation recognition. And we know that the state holds their state board meetings on the 3rd and the 4th. So typically, it's not unusual to travel up and be there for the 3rd, stay the night in Raleigh, and be there for the meeting the next day on the 4th. What did seem odd is that on the 4th, if something were to happen on the 5th, it would be to drive back to Waxhaw on the 4th, just to drive back to Raleigh on the morning of the 5th. And for graduation rate meeting. And we did reach out to Superintendent Atkinson and asked her about that. And she said that the graduation ceremony was actually held on October 3rd instead of September 5th, and school board members didn't attend. And we could not find any other activities that were going on the 5th. So that's why it's on the list.
Mr. Gosman, one question. Mr. Collins, is this the incident you attempted to clarify at our last meeting?
Your mic, please, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
On the 9/18/14 was the District 6 meeting in Belmont. Again, that was a simple, it was recorded on both the state and local expenses. And the last item on 10/15 was a State Board of Education meeting that was recorded on 10/15. And just in a quick look at when the State Board was meeting, could not identify any meetings being held on that particular day. When it comes to
Can I go back just for a
Sure.
second and clarify the graduation rate meeting? I think my simple yes was needs a little explanation. For one, I believe State Superintendent Atkinson responded that there were no state board members present, but we do, and I think I can look to Dr. Ellis wherever she might be hiding. Dr. Ellis, we do occasionally have board members show at our state graduation rate ceremonies, and several other counties do. Am I correct?
We have had in the past, the last one I attended with Carolyn White, there were no local board members at the meeting with us. I did not see a state board member that I recognized at all, but I cannot tell you I would recognize every state board member.
But local board members do a show on occasion. I know the times that I've gone, we've all sat at a reserved table.
Right.
Everybody that came from
There was
Union
no
County.
local board member that attended this October, whatever.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
all right, so those were the line items. This is not an exhaustive list. This was just a list of the items that I was able to, kind of pull together just based on laying everything side by side and putting it in a spreadsheet. So there may be some others that I just don't know about. I did not do any kind of investigating at that level. The items that, as far as the numbers below the spreadsheet, let me just explain on the state side, it shows a total of miles of 4,950 and a tenth mile. That includes everything in that mileage column except for row 6 and row 10, because those were both single leg trips, and I assume that the trip did happen, so one of them would have been valid and one of them would not have been valid. So one was taken out for each of those trips. And then on the, so that was multiplied by 25 cents per mile. That's where that dollar amount comes with, $1237.53. The miscellaneous 15, that is the board member receives $15 for every activity they do. So there are, I believe it was 25 instances. So it was the 15 times 25. That's where the 405 comes from. And then the duplicate report, again, I'm assuming they were both paid out, R9 and R10. And if you were to go ahead and say, okay, R10 was valid, R9 wasn't, the duplicate report R9 of 394.80 was included in that total. That brings it to that grand total. On the local side, the mileage was broken out based on 2013 mileage and 2014 mileage. It was reimbursed at slightly different rate, and those rates are reflected there with the total of $609.47. And with that is kind of a rundown of the data and the data sets we were looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman, for compiling information. Board members, at this time, does anybody have questions for Mr. Guzman as to how this was compiled or questions as it relates to this?
No, I'd also like to thank Mr. Guzman for compiling this information. It's very concise, and I see you've pretty much hit the highlights. I know that from other board members, I'm sure have gone over it and seen many other things, but this is the meat and potatoes of it. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Are there any other comments at this time?
Mr. Chair. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to read into the record some verbiage from the NC Department of Public Instruction. Reimbursement of travel and other expenses incurred in the discharge of official duty. Beside the signature line, these state forms require a signature attesting to, quote, under the penalties of perjury, I certify this as a true and accurate statement of expenses and allowances incurred to the service of the state, and that none of these expenses have been or will be reimbursed to me from any other source. I have examined this reimbursement request and certify that it is just and reasonable, end quote.
Thank you, sir, for reading that into the record.
Also, on the expense report from the state, there's also several incidents of lodging that were in Union County and Charlotte. And I would like to make a request that we get information from DPI for all lodging expenses as well.
Well, it's my thought, Mrs. Helms, that we can certainly do that. It's my thought at this point in time that we're not, that this investigation needs to be turned over.
And that's fine, as long as that's included.
We'll make a note.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
would you entertain a motion at this moment?
If there are no other questions or comments, yes, I will entertain them.
I'll make a motion that the chair file a complaint to the Union County Sheriff's Department for the theft of taxpayer money by Miss Marcy Savage.
I have a motion on the floor.
I would second that.
Mrs. Hodges seconded. All in favor?
Mr. Chair, I have this discussion.
Discussion.
Mr. Pigg, would you entertain a friendly motion to include the sharing of that information with the NC State Board of Education, the NC Ethics Commission, as well as the North Carolina Auditors, Fraud Investigators?
I would.
All right, so we have a motion and a friendly amendment to the motion. Is there any other discussion? So at this time,
Yeah, it would have been good to be able to have had an opportunity to talk with our colleague. The absence of that just puts just adds to the drama, I guess. Not being able to at least ask her some questions prior to this motion. But we talked about having teeth, and though mine didn't come out as nice and charty as yours, it's, my Scrabbles kind of mirrored this, and it's the absence of no response from Ms. Savage puts me in a quandary as to, so I just wish we had that opportunity.
Ms. Savage's statement will go into the record. Okay. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous with one abstention. Marcy is the abstention. All right. Moving on to item 6 of our agenda. Do we have any announcements from any of the committees? We have meetings coming up. All right, moving on to item 7, plus deltas. Moving on to.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Since we've all been brought back here this morning, I do have a comment that I'd like to make.
Certainly.
And it's basically in regard to the situation. This has been a very, very painful undertaking. It is something that I can't imagine anybody thinking that anybody would have any pleasure in any of this. I have heard several comments. Where is this in policy? And I do want to kind of respond publicly to that. Travel reimbursement, as I've said before, is for adults. When you are sworn into the Board of Education, you are sworn in with knowing that there's got to be some common sense things that, in congruence with the law, that you are going to abide by. And policy is not needed when the law states clearly that you don't commit fraud and you don't steal. There's also an honor code that we subject our students to adhering. And in addition to the honor code, there is also parts in our policy that state for wrongdoing that ignorance of the policy is not an excuse. So I do think that for people who are concerned that this should be excused because it's not written clearly in the policy, I think that we need to look first at the letter of the law. As far as a witch hunt, I need to say this. My name is Sherry Hodges. And two things that I have heard about this being a witch hunt in regard to Ms. Savage is that she voted against the reassignment that happened on March 4th. I would like to state for the record that Ms. Savage did not vote on March 4th against the reassignment plan. Myself, Sherry Hodges, voted no against the reassignment plan. It was 8-1 on that vote. Because when you get up and you walk out of a meeting, your vote counts as yes. So that needs to be very clearly stated in the record in regard to a witch hunt in that arena. The other thing is, because there was a no vote by Ms. Savage against raises for cabinet staff, I would not even begin to dignify that with a response. And the next thing is, and the final thing is, I feel that I have been a victim to this situation because not only am I a board member who has had to spend a lot of time doing due diligence in regard to this, but I'm also a taxpayer. So everybody on this board, in my opinion, and every taxpayer is a victim of this situation. And when we seek to take the responsibility off the perpetrator for anything that it, regardless of what the situation is, when we say, well, the victim is the one who has done wrong, then there is a real problem that we need to look at. This is a microcosm situation of what is going on in our society today. And it is a painful, painful thing as I get older to watch year after year. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other comments, we're going to move to item 8. Mr. Collins?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?